Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, welcome. The Ukrinform Information Agency continues our reporting. As for today, we have information from the General Prosecutor's Office. As for the morning of 23rd of February, hundreds of children were killed in the Donetsk region. The Russian forces continue to shell residential areas. A 9-year-old girl has died, as well as a 14-year-old boy. There are a lot of instances like that. So today we'll be talking to the advisor commissioner of the President of Ukraine for the Children's Rights and Rehabilitation, Daria Herasymchuk, on the topic who and where the Ukrainian children will be protected. We'll be talking about helping our children. And Daria, the floor is yours. Glory to Ukraine. Unfortunately, from the very beginning, I didn't hear what you had to say. I've got to dwell on the figures because I'm not aware whether you mentioned them. As of this morning, 121 children were killed and 167 children were heavily wounded. They are now being treated at the medical facilities. As for the evening of the 21st of March, we have such ruins as 594 schools, the facilities that had nothing to do with the military infrastructure, including 72 facilities that were completely ruined, and more than 40 facilities that don't relate to the military structure in any sense of the word. Schools, libraries, art schools. We can safely say that the Russian occupying force is fighting the civilian population, including children. I would like also to comment on the questions that I hear from the journalists about the Ukrainian children that have been taken from the territory of Ukraine. According to the information we have opened a criminal proceeding on the illegal movement of the more than 2,000 children from the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine in Donetsk and Lugansk region who were forced to move to the territory of the Russian Federation. These deeds have been qualified as forced movement of the civilian population to the aggressor country, which is in breach of Article 85 of the first additional protocol of the Geneva Protocol of 1949, which is the basis and the ground, according to the Ukrainian Criminal Court. We will check on these facts, on the forced movement, and we will act accordingly to bring those people responsible for this into account. So either we cannot either collaborate or brush away such facts. But what I have to say that the General Prosecutor's Office has opened a criminal investigation. Of course, Ukrainians are showing fantastic examples of unity, the best qualities of any nation that we can think of. Right from the beginning of the war, all the social networks were filled with different posts by the people who are ready to foster Ukrainian children, provide shelter and living conditions. Unfortunately, on this wave, we have seen a lot of fake news, according to which that 300 or 500 children who lost their parents were forced to move. These kinds of informations were shared extensively, but luckily enough, it was a fake news. We were trying to make sure that people would go through the official channels on how the children can be fostered and adopted. So together with the Ukrainian ministries and under the auspices of the UNICEF, we've set up a website, The Child is Not Alone, which says that once you have seen a child that seems to be without parents' care, and, and you have the possibility to apply for temporarily being able to provide shelter for such children. And there is also a hotline established. As for the adoption in Ukraine, it is important that all Ukrainians and our foreign partners have to realize clearly the fostering procedure is a very important and heavily regulated procedure because the child receives his or her own new family forever. This is not a temporary action, not for the time of war, it's for good and forever. Nothing can be simplified, it cannot be treated lightly. A child, his or her own destiny is decided forever. We have put in communication and information wherever we can to say that in today's Ukraine, you cannot adopt a child in fully regulated manner because we need the court's decision, the coming to know the child personally. So we ask all the Ukrainians who want to adapt, not the right wording, give Ukrainian child a new family. This good desire must be postponed until the victory. We will have enough children to be fostered. Of course, before the war, we had quite a long list of them, and it is easy to say that after the war, we will have more children with that plight, and we will be actively acting on that, on legalization of adoption in Ukraine after the war, and we will see how to do that in a timely manner. What the upgrown people can do now. In the chatbot, you can apply for the temporarily providing housing for the children. Again, this is a temporarily established procedure. That is to say, we can talk about the time before the war ends. That does not mean that a child is officially parentless. We can cite children whose parents are in the hospital or their parents are in the front lines, and the child needs a temporarily shelter and housing. What should we do? You enter the chatbot, the child is not alone. You fill in an application, and in some time, you will receive an information with a uh, information on the ability or not not providing you a possibility to provide refuge for such a child. You will be contacted in some manner, and you will know whether there is a child that is in need of temporary sanctuary. All people who will apply now for providing the temporary shelter for the children will be able to receive information in the first place that this procedure has been launched. I would also like to turn to our foreign partners and Ukrainians as well, people who are actively sharing information that some country is ready to provide shelter for 300 children or so, or something like that. In the chat bot, you can apply for application, but as we are talking about the organization that is eligible to do that with all the package of legal instruments where people which clearly say that children will be sheltered not in the families but they will be sheltered institutionally. When we talk about private families, this is not the way to go because we must be sure that our children are safe and they're doing all right. So currently, the President of Ukraine and the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine have shared a letter signed by the Prime Minister, Mr. Shmyhal, addressing our foreign partners to the effect that we ask the governments of the countries that are currently harboring and providing sanctuary for our children should be aware that their children's status is not changed for now. They are not being adapted according to the Ukrainian legislation, as well as to the legislation of other countries on the date when the Russia-Ukraine war began. I would like you to draw to mind that you must be conscious of the fact that Ukraine wants to make sure that organizations sheltering Ukrainian children are providing safe conditions. After the war is over, we will go back to normal situation. We will build our future, and this future will be based on the plight of our children. What the adults can do now for the Ukrainian children. I mentioned that 167, this is official information, have been heavily wounded and are currently treated in the Ukrainian hospitals or in foreign hospitals if some categories of children can be treated here. As Volodymyr Zhovnir mentioned yesterday, and I met the head of the Ahmadid medical facility, and he mentioned what Ukrainians can do to safeguard the health of our Ukrainian children. We are not only talking about healthy conditions, about providing vitamins and so on. Parents, in the first place, must get their children ready for the extreme situations. Now they have the parents must prepare special tags and put these tags into all possible places, into their pockets of their clothing, to put that back that sign on the as a in a way of bracelet where you say the full name, the surname, the first name, the patronymic of a child, contact like telephone numbers of his or her parents or grandparents, so that we might contact them. And it is necessary to indicate the blood group of a child and all the possible allergies. This is the information that will help us to provide an effective medical care for a child in danger or has been wounded or harmed. So I would like to turn to all the grown-ups to take care of your children now that we have still have some time. And with God's help, we will not take advantage of such information, but we must be ready. A week ago, Ukrainian schools and children were able to continue their online education. Unfortunately, many grown up people don't understand the reason of this. They say, in the time of war, what is the reason for, for children to participate in the educational process? The psychologists say that it is important for children in these stressful times to have something that connects them to the older ways, a quiet and peaceful life, a an education in the school is something that brings a child back to that feeling of stability. So all the children, all the parents that hear me now in the territories where the hostilities are not taking place, I would like you to help children to get connected to the all Ukrainian school online or to get back online to the school where children were studying before the war, or get in contact with the schools in the city where you live now. Of course, children is our future, and the future must be well educated. That's why education for children must be uninterrupted. As for the education of children with special needs or people or children that were educated in special schools. Currently, the Ministry for Education of Ukraine is developing all the possible algorithms for such children to continue their studies. We are also gathering data on the gadgets for the children with special needs, for them to join in the online education. Thank goodness, Ukraine has a lot of truly friends, unlike our neighbor to the east, the Russian Federation, people who are in countries who are ready to provide such devices for the children to get connected on the net. We also would like to inform you that children who have left Ukraine and they are beginning their education in the countries where they are living now. Let me also inform you that recently the Cabinet of Ministers officially set up a coordinating headquarters that is taking care of all children's issues during the um, martial law in Ukraine. And this the Minister for Social Policy, Ms. Lazarna, and myself, Daria Herasymchuk, the advisor commissioner of the President of Ukraine for the Children's Rights, are co-chairing this headquarters. We have all things under control and will be guiding the routine procedures of providing children with all possible to meet all their possible needs. And of course, we are thinking about the legal changes that must secure our children to live in a safe conditions. If you questions, I'm ready to answer them. Dear colleagues, if you have questions, please write them in the chat. I've got a question from the Ukrinform agency. Would you please tell us the algorithm of how to cool down our children, quiet them in time of the air raid uh, signals, for example, when the sirens are on? Of course, children who have suffered in as the consequence of the Russian aggression. I'm saying that every child in Ukraine is part of this. Children are watching television. They know what is going on in our country. They hear air raid alarms. So every child is currently suffering from the hostilities in Ukraine. What the adults can do. It is important to remember that child psychology is much weaker than that of grown ups, and the adults must be paying very special attention. When a child is stricken, you must hug your children. Do it as hard as you can, and a child can hug himself or herself so that a child can feel his or her own child. We should look a child straight into his or her eyes. You must tell them that we are doing everything we can for you to feel safe. A child must be aware that you are doing everything you can, and very soon everything is going to be fine. You must say to a child, breathe steadily, exhale, inhale. And if a child is heavily panic stricken, you must uh, give him or her some water and wash their faces with water. I would also like the adults to remember that when you go into the bomb shelter or you are evacuating your children, you must make sure that a child has in his or her own a beloved um, toy or buy a new one, but there must be something near the child, with the child, part of what he or she considers to be a safe environment, like a toy. I think all Ukrainians see now how different educators and creative Ukrainians come up with the devices and methods of behavior, how to quiet a child when they sing songs in the bomb shelters, organize different games and so on. But you must keep quiet yourself because children looking at you that you keep quiet will also feel safe. Thank you. I would also like to add that the Ministry of Education has just launched an initiative of how to make your children feel safe on the YouTube channel. The author is Svetlana Choice, and she is publishing short videos on how to behave with the children. There's another point that has to do with the question that we are hearing very often. When you cross the border, the adults must remember that we have now a simplified procedure of crossing the border. This procedure says that once you are driving or going with a minor, which is under 16 years of age, you can take your child across the border without an official document that allows his or her crossing without the consent of the other parent. They can also be in charge of the uh, elder brother. If you want to have your child getting through the border by your relatives or by your friends, you have to go to the service of children's care and you must write your consent that my child go through the border with such and such people. It must be legalized by the Ukrainian Children's Service, and this will be enough for a child to cross the border. As for the children who have reached 16 years of age until 18 years of age, they cross the border on the basis of their own documents. As for the so-called status children, children that have the status of an orphan, they have to have a broader set of documents. If this is an organized group of people, they have to produce an invitation with the final point of destination and also copies of those who are inviting them. And they must be supported by the invitation of the organization. And the civil military organization must also provide the allowance for these groups of children to leave Ukraine. So there is a set of documents where you indicate the accompanying persons and they spell out the responsibilities of these accompanying companies. So there are some procedures of crossing the border, and you must be aware of that, be ready for that. This is very important for us to know where children are going, how they are doing, and who is responsible for their fate in the future. Thank you. Thank you, Daria, for these exhaustive answers. Currently, we don't have any more questions. Once we have them, I will redirect the questions to your mail. And thank you for your participation. I wish everybody Ukraine